the greater nuance of George R.R. Martin's planned ending that the show fails to crystallize and clarify. So if you're like me and you love the first 4 seasons of the adaptation TV series Game of Thrones, but you absolutely detest the ending along with most of the last 2 seasons, but you're also someone who thoroughly enjoys the books, especially books 1 through 3, and you're someone who has been thoroughly gripped by the recent HBO spin-off series The Night of the Seven Kingdoms and the recent 3rd season of House of the Dragon, all of this has caused you to reflect on the truly disastrous final season of what was the biggest and most successful TV show ever written. Yeah, I cannot tell you how disappointing it was to be a huge Game of Thrones fan and to slowly see the pieces start unraveling as we meandered towards that flaccid, facile failure of an ending. Yes, this is an ending that has been talked to death by fans and critics alike, but as I reflect on just why it is such a failure, I think there are some details that most people still miss 7 years later. It goes without saying, full spoilers ahead. To me, it's not the fact that Bran becomes king. It's not Daenerys' shift towards her Mad Queen arc. It's not even Jaime's return to Cersei, though I do kind of hate that too in a way. It's in the greater nuance that is lost in these events when the showrunners chose to speed all these events up and they lose the slow development that they require. Much of this blame can be placed on D&D's shoulders since they were responsible for the show. But much can also be cast to George himself since these showrunners excelled at adaptation, and when they ran out of books, George only provided 3 major plot points to guide them to the show's conclusion. The problem is some writers excel at adapting another's work through a new lens, but fail at writing meticulously and logically plotted original material. And I think George should have recognized this and provided more of a helping hand, or, finished the last 2 books. Writing great adaptation is an underappreciated art in itself, you see. But my biggest main problem with the Game of Thrones ending is that Bran becoming king is ultimately botched on arrival due to these underbaked elements and this lack of development and proper pacing. In the books, Bran is essentially being manipulated and thrust along to a series of events by Brynden Rivers. Brynden Rivers, aka Blood Raven, aka the Three-Eyed Raven. The Three-Eyed Raven who is like an omniscient, all-seeing eye in Westeros. And the implication in the books is that this guy is a spooky presence, not so much a heroic one necessarily. There is some Lovecraftian cosmic horror going on behind the scenes, and the show nullifies and neuters that horror in order to make Bran look more heroic in the end. But in the show, when Brynden Rivers sacrifices himself and Bran becomes the new Three-Eyed Raven, the implication is that Bran takes on the personalities of the Three-Eyed Ravens that came before, in a way killing his own soul or personality and making him merge with this hive mind consciousness personality. This, in theory, should build to a conclusion where the Three-Eyed Raven is a sinister presence on the throne. And I think it is a great ending for the show in a way, because it changes the course of Westeros forever to something akin to a malicious, all-seeing surveillance state. I mean, Bran is basically a Lovecraftian big brother king figure by the end of the show, and I think that is a fascinating, compelling, and outright cynical end to such a show, but the show completely botches that nuance and boils it down to Bran is king and he is just Bran minus the Bran we used to know. And sadly, that's not the full picture. When you understand this, it makes the Night King's quest to kill Bran, aka the Three-Eyed Raven, so much more interesting and mysterious, but the show fails to see this greater nuance. More so though, yeah, the show ultimately ruins the character arcs of all of our favorite characters. Jon Snow, Jaime Lannister and Cersei Lannister, Daenerys Targaryen, Arya Stark, of course, Tyrion Lannister, Littlefinger Varys too, and even Euron Greyjoy. Most of these characters are all reduced down to pale imitations of their book counterparts. They are not given the proper time to develop. I mean, Euron's place in this adaptation becomes null and void as he's reduced to the guy who cucks Jaime Lannister. When in the books, like, Euron is the most evil and terrifying presence Westeros has probably ever seen. Jaime Lannister, who was my favorite character in the TV show, who I think is the richest and most interesting and compelling character in the show, who's had seasons of amazing development, is completely stripped of all of that, and that development is undermined and thrown away when the show chooses to spit in the face of his arc to cheaply put the pieces together for an ending that doesn't truly work. Tyrion Lannister, who was once the show's cleverest, most intelligent survivor, is reduced to a blubbering idiot because the showrunners weren't smart enough to write great stuff for him, or they weren't bold enough to make him a true villain. Arya's entire negative arc of self-destruction through vengeance is completely tossed away when the books choose instead to thoughtfully explore how trauma, loss, and cycles of violence and revenge can tarnish a person's very soul. Instead, the show's solution is to make Arya a plot-armored superhero who destroys the Night King for cheap subversion. And Jon Snow? I mean, Jon Snow's ending is perhaps the most baffling of all of these after all this time. Kind of a spit in the face to fans of the books and the show. For 7 seasons, Jon Snow had been built up as this force that would have stopped the Night King, but instead we got a cheaply subversive ending where that doesn't happen and Jon instead kills Daenerys. Cheap subversion for subversion's sake doesn't accomplish anything when it doesn't serve the greater overarching narrative in a compelling or thought-provoking manner. All of these problems compiled together, in deep reflection, still makes Game of Thrones and its ending one of the greatest failures in television writing ever. And I have heard a lot of people say, because of how disastrous the ending to Game of Thrones is, they're not going to watch the spinoff series, they're not interested in this world anymore, and it actually completely undermines the great seasons of Game of Thrones, seasons 1 through 4, 5 and 6 to some degree. But I completely disagree with this read. I mean, just because the ending to the show sucked, that does not take away from the incredible world that Martin built and D&D adapted for those first 4 seasons. And I think those first 4 seasons stand on their own as a truly, truly great piece of work, as great television. And the books are still fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, I've been watching House of the Dragon and Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I've been reflecting on Game of Thrones a lot. I wanted to touch on this. And as I said, I am thoroughly gripped by House of the Dragon Season 3 right now, and I am excited to see where the showrunners take it next. Peace.